We have a pair of wild card races heating up in both the Eastern and Western Conference, and the Edmonton Oilers, who entered the 2024-2025 season as Stanley Cup favorites, are in quite a rut on today's edition of Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That's my good friend and my co-host and the co-host of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodes. We want to thank everyone who's making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, where right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, on today's show, we're going to tackle both wildcard races, quite a few teams in both conferences, building up between that two wildcard spots and then like the fourth team down in both conferences are very much still alive. Somehow teams like the Islanders and the Blues are alive in their respective conferences, which is crazy. And then we'll wrap today's show talking about the struggling Edmonton Oilers, who over the last month are 5-8 and have put together some really alarming offensive numbers and are dealing with really, really bad goaltending. So we're going to start in the Western Conference because last night, quite a few important games in that department. And we have a pocket of teams that all entered the season in varying degrees of uncertainty. You have teams like Vancouver, who made the playoffs last year, but kind of had a everything went right for them type season. There were questions about how much they would be able to sustain. We can't not mention the Calgary Flames, who have surprised all year long on the back of Dustin Wolf in a superb rookie goaltending campaign. Then the St. Louis Blues and the Utah Hockey Club are still hanging around as well. St. Louis and Utah coming on strong as of late. And we've got a real pocket of teams who all have serious flaws, but it really feels like it's going to be a war of attrition. Whoever's the last team standing is going to pull this out because none of these teams are that impressive, but none of these teams are that bad either.
No, I agree with that. It's really a four-team race right now for the final spot in the Western Conference. You know, Calgary is right there, Vancouver, St. Louis, and Utah. And last night was pretty big, especially for Utah, and they got a big win last night. You had Seattle also get a big win. And I know they only have 60 points. They're 11 points out right now, but it was still really cool seeing Brandon Montour get that win so quickly. But Utah, they won 3-2 over the Ducks. You saw Vancouver play Calgary. And what sucks about that win for Vancouver, the only thing that sucks about it, Nick, is that they gave Calgary a point in that game. That's the type of game, especially at this time of year, you want to take 2 clean points. You don't want to give the other team that you're chasing 1 point. They did, but hey, they still got the 2 points. They won in a shootout. But this is going to come down to, I think, the final day of the regular season. It reminds me a lot of the Eastern Conference wildcard playoff race these last couple of years, where it was kind of like a turtle race. Like, it's just a bunch of turtles racing to the end. Who's going to beat there first? Oh, my God, it's going to take 20 years for someone to win this race. That's what it feels like right now with this race. But it is nice seeing some teams that haven't been in the playoff race in a little bit. You know, the Flames, for example, they were not good last year. No one expected this from them this year. And right now, they have the game in hand on the Canucks, which is why they are in the final playoff spot and not the Canucks. The Blues, I still don't think the Blues are that good, but they're also not that bad either, as you said, 31-27-7. And then Utah, their loser points, they have 11. That's, I think, a big reason why they are where they are in the standings. But this is a team that still has quite a bit of talent up front. They're getting some really good goaltending, and they have a nice defensive group on the back end as well. So I'm excited to see how this goes, you know, for the Eastern Conference. You know, right
we'll
now,
get there. Don't spoil the second segment.
You know what? You're right. I'm not going
Don't
to
spoil the second segment.
The West, though, I'm excited to see where this goes because you can make an argument right now for any of these four teams to get that final playoff spot. Like, I think you look at the rest of the standings in the West, right? Winnipeg, yeah, they're in. Dallas, they're in. Colorado, they're going to make it. Vegas, Edmonton, LA, they're all going to get in. Minnesota's the same way. Outside of that, like, it's anyone's game for that final spot, and it's going to make for some really fun games down the stretch.
I think the single biggest thing for me, if I'm going to pick one of these teams, is the health of Quinn Hughes. Because when Quinn Hughes is healthy, he's been the best defenseman in the world. I was having a conversation with one of my friends about this literally 10 minutes before we started recording, because NHL.com put out their award solicitation from all their from their various writers from across the league, and they had Zach Werenski first, Cale Makar second, and I forget who was third, and Quinn Hughes was one of the guys who was also getting votes. And Quinn's not going to win the Norris this year because he's missed too many games. He's been injured on and off all season, dealing with that wrist injury, finger injury. And I think there's no player more important to their team's success this particular NHL season than Quinn Hughes. When you look at the metrics for on and off the ice for what he does for that team, the results they've had in terms of wins and losses when he's been out of the lineup, I think he's probably the best player on any of these bubble teams, and his health is of the utmost importance. That's a Canucks team that is under extreme fire in every single direction. You have a coach who's getting a lot of heat from a lot of different places. You have players like Elias Pettersson who've been getting it all year. Someone like Brock Besser, who's been a Vancouver institution, almost certainly going to be on his way out after this year after not getting traded at the deadline.
They have to make the playoffs this year, or there's going to be major, and I mean major changes, especially after last year, Nick. The season that they had came one win away from getting to the conference final. You miss the playoffs this year. I kind of shudder to think about what Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin will do to this team, because I mean, I know what Jim Rutherford is as a GM. He's aggressive. He's a bit crazy. He's pretty blunt as well. I know he's the president of hockey operations, but Patrick Allvin came with him to Vancouver. They kind of cut from the same cloth here when it comes to hockey operations. It will be a crazy summer in Vancouver if they miss the playoffs.
That's kind of the biggest plot line to me. And you want to give credit where it's due. Calgary is in a weird in-between where they didn't expect to be here, but you saw in the fact that they didn't trade a Nazem Kadri or a Blake Coleman or a Rasmus Anderson at this deadline, or for that matter, a Michael Backlund, who all would have commanded really nice returns at this deadline as solid veteran pieces. Some of those guys, Coleman, Anderson, etc., have term, and instead everybody kind of looked around and said, we think we're in this. We don't want to trade away veteran guys. We want the young guys that we're going to start integrating over the next year and a half and change or so into this group to be impactful. We want them to feel like they're being rewarded for the moves we've made. And I like what they've done in adding Farabee and Frost. I've always liked both of their games. I think they are players that fit the window of the younger group that's burgeoning there. And then Utah, they've been pesky. Like you said, the loser points have kept them in the mix. Karo Vejmelka, who they extended over last week ahead of the trade deadline, has done a really nice job for them in net. And it's going to be really exciting to see what happens here down the backstretch. I can see an argument for all of these teams getting into one of those two spots. I think you're right. I think Minnesota is almost certainly safe. But after them, I could see any of these teams in that last spot.
Minnesota, their biggest thing is they just got to get healthy. Like Kaprizov is hurt right now. Eriksson Ek is hurt. That's so much of your offense. It's also so much of your two-way play in your own zone. They got to get both those guys back, especially if they want to make noise in the playoffs. But outside of that, Vancouver, if they can get Pettersson going here a bit more down the stretch, they will have a good shot. Ditto for Dustin Wolf. If he continues his form, the Flames will have a good shot. With Utah, if they can keep getting production from all four lines, they will have a good shot. And then St. Louis, we've seen Jordan Binnington get hot before down the stretch of the season and into the playoffs. He gets hot. Again, I can make a case for all four of these teams, man. I really can. It's going to be a good race.
All right, real quick. We only have a minute. Rank the four teams in order of how confident you feel in them.
Okay, I'm actually going to go Calgary number 1. I'm going to go Vancouver 2, Utah 3, St. Louis 4. It's a really tough call, honestly.
I'm going to go Vancouver, Calgary, Utah, St. Louis. Vancouver's got the most high-end players of those four teams, and that's what I'm going to defer to. Like I said, if Quinn Hughes is healthy, I think they absolutely can do this. We're going to revisit this conversation from the Eastern Conference perspective after this break, and things are getting mighty interesting, Hunter. We'll be right back. Did you just realize your business needs to hire someone like yesterday? How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. We've all been in that spot where you need to make the right hire like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback to you and your team. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now, you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Today's show is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center, so you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on takeout. Now I budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL as we make our way through two very compelling wildcard races in both conferences. Now, pivoting over to the East, playing the role of the Calgary Flames, you could argue is both the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Ottawa Senators, who there was an argument they could be on this bubble. They might be in this conversation, but Columbus absolutely coming out of nowhere. Montreal kind of coming out of nowhere. I think Montreal and Columbus being here is more of a testament to the fall off of, say, Boston, the Rangers, and the Islanders from last year, as opposed to those teams in particular being that much better. But all of these teams have significant flaws. When you talk about Ottawa, Columbus, Montreal, the Rangers, Detroit, Boston, even down to the Islanders, who are only set 5 points out of that last spot with 18 games to play, all of these teams have major warts, and someone is going to make the playoffs out of this collection of teams.
100%. Now, I do have a question for you. How many 20-goal scorers do you think Columbus has this year?
If I had to guess off the top of my head, I would probably say 2, but I honestly have no idea.
Oh, no, Nick. It's 5. They have 5 20-goal
So let me see if I can guess. Yep. Marchenko?
Yep.
Him I know for a fact because they played the Rangers the other day. Ken Johnston?
Yes.
Does Werenski have 20?
Yes, he does.
All right, after that, I got no idea.
Fantilli and Voronkov also
Fantilli I should have got. He had a hat trick against the Rangers the other night.
This team is playing like they got nothing to lose. Yeah. And that's dangerous, man. Like, no one expected this from them. They are the best story in the NHL this season. Like, everything they have been through over the last year plus, they are playing their hearts out every single night. And this is a team that has a lot of young talent, and they're only going to keep getting better, I think, in the next few years. And, Nick, they have cap space. They could potentially be a lot better next year, especially if these young players keep developing and they potentially sign a big name free agent or make a big trade for a player that's on the trade market. They could be a contender sooner rather than later. I mean, again, Werenski, he's having one of the best seasons of his career, 20 goals, 69 points in 63 games. Kirill Marchenko, he was a healthy scratch last year at times, by the way. 25 goals, 62 points this year. Kent Johnson, 21 goal scorer. Adam Fantilli, he's going to be a thorn in a lot of Metro team sides for a long time. And then Voronkov, he also has 20 goals. You know, James Van Riemsdyk has had a fun year. You know, it's so fun watching this team on a nightly basis because they get the offense, but they also know how to play in their own zone as well. I think Dean Evison has really preached that two-way play that's been lacking from the Blue Jackets for the last few years, and he's done a tremendous job with this team. So they really are playing with nothing to lose. Ottawa, I think this is a make or break year. Like, they have to close the deal here, especially in a very, very mid-Eastern Conference. They don't get in this year, I think you might see some big changes from the organization from top on down. Brady Tkachuk's been amazing. I would love to see what a team would offer him via trade if they miss the playoffs here. But I still think right now, if I had to guess, I think they're going to get in. Montreal, they're taking another nice step this year. And that's what I wanted to see from them heading into the season, right? I wanted to see them at least take the next step. I said during our preview show, you don't have to make the playoffs this year, but you have to take that next step and show your fans that this rebuild is working. I think Montreal has more than done that. And I think even if they don't make the playoffs this year, they're going to have a really good shot next year. The Rangers, Nick, they just look cooked, man. I know they're still very much in the race, but they're losing games that last year, they would be blowing these teams out. Their big guns are not really playing that well this year. A lot of their good contributions are coming from their depth forwards. Panarin has not been as good this year. Trocheck has not been as good this year. I understand the Adam Fox injury has been really bad here down the stretch, but their big guns that really carried the play last year are not doing that this year so far. Detroit, they had a really nice stretch, but they've lost 7 of the last 10 games. They're kind of falling out of the race a little bit. Boston, they're still 2 points out, but I still don't really trust them. The Islanders are still kind of in it. But again, do I really trust the Islanders either? No. Again, much like the Western Conference and much like the East race in the last 2 years, it's a turtle race, and it's going to come down to the final night of the regular season.
It's very much that episode of SpongeBob with the snail race, where yes, Patrick's telling Rocky to take his time. That's kind of how this feels in the Eastern Conference right now. If I had to pick one of these teams, I would probably tell you the Rangers have the most talent, but it doesn't really matter if the talent doesn't play like it. Detroit is all offense, no defense. Their defense is atrocious. They're one of the few teams that plays worse defense than the Rangers. They have the worst penalty kill in the entire NHL. Detroit does. Columbus is a nice story. I think Columbus's depth has really shined brightly for them this year and has been a difference maker. I really have no feel in this group. All it takes is one good week. Last week, coming into this week, which started on Monday, the Rangers had lost to Ottawa and Columbus on back-to-back days, and those were effectively play-in playoff games where if you won both of those games, that's an 8-point swing in the standings, and instead you lost both, and Montreal leapfrogged you. And real quick, we should shout out Nick Suzuki's got the 8th most points in the entire NHL since the start of February. He's been on quite a tremendous heater. His power play numbers have been outstanding. Montreal is a team that all of the little pieces are kind of coming together now. Now it's simply a matter of figuring out which of the guys they've drafted over the last handful of years they're going to keep and which ones they're going to push into a package to try and upgrade and level up into something bigger, because that's kind of your goal now. If you're a Montreal, I even dare say in Ottawa, where you have a lot of young talent, you can't keep all of it, and you want to take that next step. That next step is getting an elite player in there. Yeah. I like a lot of Montreal's pieces. I think Hudson is going to finish top 3 in the Calder voting. I think he's having a tremendous season. They've drafted Gooley. They drafted Moliu. They drafted Reinbacher. They've drafted 5-6 defensemen. They're not going to keep all of them. They have a prospect goalie in Dobyshev, who's been really good when he's played in spurts. He was really good against the Rangers last month in a start when they went head-to-head. And if you're Montreal, you're waiting for that call, that disgruntled star who wants a relocation, and then you turn 2 of those guys into that star and you drop them next to Suzuki and Slafkovsky and say, all right, we're here now. We are ready to take that next step. And it's a fun story. Them, Columbus, to some extent, Detroit being in this conversation for the first time in a while is a nice story. And I also think it's a testament to how big the fall off has been for the Rangers, for Boston, and for the Islanders. The Islanders, I think Barzell's only played 40 games this year. He's been out a good chunk of the year.
I don't think he's coming back during the regular season. At least that's what Lou Lamoriello said after the trade deadline. He said that they're really not sure. So if they want to make the playoffs, they're going to have to do it without their best player and without Brock Nelson, who, of course, they dealt.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot. The Bruins, you had a brain drain. You lost all your good players. It happens. And guys got old. It happens. They went from playing Charlie Coyle as the third line center to the second line center. And they brought in Lindholm to try and be the Bergeron facsimile. And that's not good enough. And they're kind of just out of options, Boston. I mean, them trading Brad Marchand is as close as you're going to get to waving a white flag in professional sports.
I mean, they basically did, right? I mean, They tried offering him a contract. Marchand kind of felt offended by it, and the Bruins like, okay, well, where do you want to go? Like, we probably know that we might not make the playoffs this year, so where do you want to go? Traded him to Florida. I know Bruins fans are very upset with Don Sweeney right now. I get it. You know, Marchand wanted to remain a Bruin for his entire career. Well, we do have to see what happens, Nick, this summer. Does he potentially go back? Does he sign with another team? Again, that's all TBD, but like you saw what the Bruins did. I mean, Nick, they traded Brandon Carlo to their biggest rival. Like, to me, that's waving the white flag, man. I know they're still in the race, but when you trade Brad Marchand to the Florida Panthers, who has been one of your better rivals the past couple of years, and you trade Brandon Carlo to your biggest rival, the Maple Leafs, to me, that is waving the white flag.
It's a humbling feeling. That conversation is only going to get louder. I know I was talking to one of my friends who had Bruin season tickets, and she said she wasn't going to renew them for next year, and they're still in the renewal period. So I'll be very curious to see how loud that conversation gets around Cam Neely and Don Sweeney. We are going to take one more break on today's edition of Locked On NHL, and when we come back, we're going to talk about my struggling Edmonton Oilers. See you guys in a second. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. For me, I don't watch a lot of regular season college basketball. I am very unexciting when it comes time to filling out my bracket or picking games. I'm going to be loading up with favorites, and FanDuel makes it easy to bet on them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all March long. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. And Hunter, I don't know if you know this or not, but the Oilers have been booty for about a month now. Just outright terrible hockey. The
goaltending has been especially atrocious. Like, I've been trying to catch as many games as I can of theirs because I love watching McDavid. I love watching Draisaitl do their thing. But Stuart Skinner is really struggling right now. And I can't lie, man, I am concerned about this team heading into the playoffs. Like, I know they can get hot. Like, we saw it last season. But right now, I am concerned about them because, you know, the big guns, they're doing their thing. But a lot of the players that they've brought in over the last year have really not been that good of fits. I mean, yeah, Nick, Corey Perry, he has 14 goals this year, but he only has 22 points in 63 games. Jeff Skinner, everyone thought that was going to be a great fit, myself included. He has not been that good. Same with Victor Arvidsson. I thought he was going to be a really solid middle six scorer. He doesn't even have 10 goals this year. Adam Henrique has really not been that good. Matthias Janmark only has 2 goals this year. I mean, man, it's been rough for the Oilers outside of the big guns up top at forward.
So the way I would describe this is the Oilers' great players are so great.
Yeah.
They can do a lot of the heavy lifting. When you talk about McDavid, Draisaitl, to a lesser extent, Bouchard, those guys are good enough that most nights they will keep you in the game.
Yeah.
The problem for the Oilers, especially since the start of February, has been that the supporting cast has been outright bad. Over the course of the last month. And the thing that really was crazy to me when I was doing research for the episode I did earlier this week, the Oilers are losing McDavid's minutes in goal share over the last month. They've been outscored by like 13 in McDavid's minutes over the last 13 regular season games, which goes back to the 1st of February against the Avalanche. And if you're losing McDavid's minutes, the rest of your recipe falls apart. And we know plus minus is not the be all end all. It's not a great statistic, but if you are losing McDavid's minutes by double-digit goals, something is fundamentally wrong with your team. If you're the best player in the world has a negative goal share for a 10-game window, if it's not one or two, we're talking about a month and a half worth of games, and the Oilers are losing those minutes and convincingly. And even when you're playing him with Draisaitl, you're still only close to 50%. You're not over 60% in goal share. So if you can't even win the McDavid minutes, how are you supposed to win the Adam Henrique, Connor Brown, Matthias Janmark minutes? The entire equation falls apart if you can't win the McDavid minutes convincingly.
No, 100%. Like, if you're not winning those minutes, you're not outscoring the teams when your big guns are on the ice. I mean, I know that doesn't take a rocket scientist to see this. You're not going to go anywhere. Like, you have to at least do something when those guys are out there. And if this doesn't turn around quickly, I could see an early exit in the playoffs. And I can't even believe I'm saying that, considering, I picked them to go back to the Cup final this year. I picked them to win it all this year just because I like the moves they made. I figured this wouldn't happen. But also, Nick, their goaltending needs to be so much better, man. Like, I know you were telling me a little bit of the numbers before we start recording, since I know you obviously host the Locked On Oilers podcast. Stuart Skinner has been dreadful for the last.
And Pickard have both been bad.
Yeah, it still gets to the point where I feel like they should have went out and gotten a goalie at the deadline.
Oh, I agree with you. I was pounding the desk to go out and get a goalie. The problem was the game of goalie musical chairs ended very early in the week. John Gibson got hurt. Vejmelka signed an extension, and Jonathan Quick wasn't leaving the East Coast. There wasn't really, unless you wanted to roll the Vanacek dice, which Florida did, which credit to them for doing that, but they also have a firmly entrenched starter where you can go and get a volatile backup. There wasn't really a great answer for the Oilers in net, and that's why they ultimately chose to stand pat there. And the other thing I wanted to get in on the Oilers before we wrap, this week is as close to a get right week as you possibly could have gotten. Monday they played Buffalo and they lost 3-2. Tage Thompson kind of sunned them for lack of a better expression. Buffalo is one of the 5 worst defensive teams in the entire NHL. Tonight they're playing the New Jersey Devils. The Devils have been one of the worst defensive teams in the NHL over the last month and a half. They play the Islanders and the Rangers over the weekend. Those are 2 of the worst defensive teams in the entire NHL. If the Oilers cannot break their goal scoring issues over the next 3 games, I think at that point, if they don't take at least 2 out of 3 on the New York swing over the course of the next 4 days, you got to be pushing the panic button by Monday as far as the direction of the team, because this is as close to a give me a get right road trip as you're going to get, playing Buffalo, New Jersey, the Rangers, and the Islanders in a 4-game swing. All 4 of these teams are actively bad at defense, and the Oilers need to start scoring goals. This is as give me as it gets.
Yep, 100%, man. And, it looks like we're still on a collision course to see Edmonton, LA part 5,000 because they play in the first round, it feels like, every single year. And while I do think Edmonton can and will beat LA in the first round, beyond that right now, are they going to beat Vegas in the second round? Not with the way Vegas is going right now. Stone is playing very well. Eichel's been great. Heck, they have Tanner Pearson playing top line minutes right now. The Penguins just played Vegas twice over the last week, and they got Tanner Pearson is out there playing his tail off. That is a very good team. And again, man, the Rangers, we all know they can't defend. They have not defended all year. Nope. The Devils, Dougie Hamilton is going to be out, it looks like, Nick, for the rest of the regular season per the Devils. With him not out there, you'd think this would be a prime opportunity for the Oilers to get right. Again, also, the Devils are without Jack Hughes for the rest of the season. That's big in this game as well. You can't get right here. We're going to have to start having some conversations if this team is a true Stanley Cup contender or not. Because, again, heading into the season, I thought that. I still know when these guys get hot, they can beat anyone. But this is the time of year where it's put up or shut up time. The playoffs start in literally a month, man.
I'll leave you with this parting thought, guys, as you listen. Going in on Monday, I was putting together a power rankings of who I felt was the strongest Stanley Cup contender. On Monday morning, when I made the graphic, I had the Oilers in the 8th spot, the lowest I've had them at any point all season. They lost to Buffalo on Monday, and Buffalo is the worst team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
I had to drop them out of the top 8. I put Carolina in that spot, and I don't even think Carolina is that good. I just think Carolina has the benefit of playing in the Eastern Conference, and the path out of the East is a whole lot easier than the path out of the West, because we'll game it out real quick for you. Even if you play LA in the first round, you're playing Vegas or Minnesota in the second round, and then you're playing Colorado, Dallas, or Winnipeg in the conference final.
Yeah.
And then you're going to play Florida or Tampa in the cup final. The path out of the West is brutal. It is such an advantage to be in the Eastern Conference this year, where if you're a team like Columbus, you could sneak up on Washington. You could sneak up on Florida. Yeah. It's not entirely out of the question if you're Columbus or Ottawa that you catch one of those teams a little bit off guard.
No, I agree. I mean, the East, outside of, I would say,
the Florida teams, that's really it for me.
I'll still put Washington third. I think Washington is still very good, but I think some of their lack of forward depth might get exposed by playing Tampa and Florida if both teams are fully healthy. And I still am curious to see if their goalies can stay that hot into the playoffs, because, you know, that's always a big thing when it comes to playoff hockey. But I think a team like Ottawa, Columbus, they can give Washington a series. I would not pick those two teams to beat Washington, Nick. I think Washington would win that series. But if Washington were to play, you know, a Tampa, Florida in the conference final, or even, you know, another one of the Metro teams in the second round, you know, even Carolina, for example, I would think long and hard about it. Like, I know I don't ever trust Carolina in the playoffs that often just because of the way they play, but I would still at least think about it, especially with Carolina in there. So, hey, the West, we all know it's an arms race. It's going to be brutal going to the Stanley Cup final. The East, not nearly as deep, but, you know, one of those Florida teams is going to be out by the conference final. Like the Capitals, for example, they're not going to have to go through both Florida teams. You're going to have to go through one of them because, in our opinion, I think we both are going to see Tampa versus Florida in the second round.
Yeah, as of right now, that's the way things are shaping up, which would be a lot of fun. That'll do it for today's edition of Locked On NHL. Thank you to everyone who made Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Please be so kind. Subscribe to the show. Leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Subscribe if you're watching over on YouTube. Hunter and I will talk to you guys next week.